Wow, you guys were busy bees last week. More than 100 different discussion posts and replies. And I loved the conversation. I especially loved the image that was located by a few students, but posted by one, to help explain Gestalt theory. And I included it here in the overview just to kind of remind you that that exists and see if you wanted to go find it for yourselves and save it for future reference. Because it is a fantastic image to help provide an overview of what does it mean when we talk about Gestalt and the Gestalt theory in particular. I also wanted to point out a particular quote in the discussion that I think really hammers home the reasoning behind the assignment and why you're looking at logos and we're discussing Gestalt theory. And this came from Andrew. In many of the logos that seem to work better, they show that they have a good sense of Gestalt's laws implemented. And I think that that's true for a lot of these logos. You'll notice on screen that I also have some resources to share with you, primarily that last one, famous logos and their hidden meanings. So this is actually a website that I discovered, and I'm going to share the link with you here on screen. It's from designhill.com, and it's an interactive guide to famous logos and their hidden meanings. Kind of fascinating if you're curious about some of these. You'll notice that a number of the logos that were discussed in class appear on this website. In particular, though, I was kind of chuckling that no one used a baseball team logo. If you take a look at that famous logos website, you'll see the Milwaukee Brewers and the use of the B for Brewers and the M for Milwaukee to form the baseball mitt. So I thought it was interesting that we didn't have any sports analogies come up in the discussion, but there are so many different hidden elements to logos that sometimes it's interesting to see these in more or less a consolidated place. On screen, there's another image I want to draw your attention to real quick, and that is the Orida logo. It's not so much the logo that stands out, but I wanted to share an epiphany with you all. Some of you mentioned that until recently you did not realize that the Goodwill logo contained a face. Others may not have noticed the arrow in the FedEx logo. Personally, my epiphany came last year with Orida. And actually, it was during one of their Hulu commercials. I actually saw the logo as it appears on screen. You'll notice that it's the regular Orida logo, but above it, it has quality since 1952. Placed in between the quality statement and the primary logo is another small image. That image was my epiphany because until now, I've never seen this iteration of their logo. I've only ever seen the main logo or the main logo with the quality tagline. When they added that small image in the middle, I suddenly realized that the company name is taken from Oregon and Idaho as states that produce potatoes. Yes, I know, it sounds so silly, and I'd never realized it until a year ago. So that was my epiphany, and because of logo design and visual literacy, I finally came to recognize that. But all of this has been a fantastic adventure that has led us into some other interesting discussions. One in particular I want to call your attention to is James Finder's post in talking about the walled garden concept of classes. That is, in structure and Canvas, while courses, has created a walled garden. Much of what we create is behind closed doors. It's not shared. He mentioned coming across a website, I believe it's called A Graphic World, and it's a blog on graphic design. It seems to be tied to a specific graphic design class. This is an interesting idea, and I would encourage you all to go back to James's post in last week's discussion and kind of explore the idea of sharing what you find. We have closed discussions to share this, but what if these were structured through a public blog? What if the discussion posts weren't within Canvas, but were publicly available, and you provided your insight and expertise? What if instead of me providing discussion prompts, you generated them yourselves? There's a lot of questions here, and it leads to some very interesting conversations, or at least it can. So that's my last bit for wrapping up last week. Head back over to James's discussion post. If you're scrolling down the page, look for the Coca-Cola and Chick-fil-A logos, and then down below that, you'll see where he says, as an aside. So jump into that conversation and let's talk about what this could mean for the class if we took down the walls around our garden. One last thing I want to mention before we transition to this week's topic. Now is a great time to revisit the logo that you designed for class and change it for your website, for that portfolio that you're creating. If you wanted to resubmit your work to address particular comments or deficiencies in the rubric, you may do so. But more so, the challenge is now that you've had a chance to play and learn the theory, you can refine your practice by redesigning your logo based off of what you learned last week. Just wanted to throw that out there. Use the on-screen navigation to access another section of this week's overview.
Paints the sky just after sunrise.